The engine in the big two-seater truck hummed as it flew along the highway. The tall man behind the wheel glanced at the petite red-haired head cowering in the passenger seat. She was rocking back and forth in obvious pain. "Doc, could you stop for a bottle of water? I need to take 2 more Midol tablets." "I'll go get some water." "But, Annie, you've already taken 8 pills in the last 2 hours. 2 more won't help." "I can't believe you forgot your medicine." The woman exploded with anger. "I didn't forget the damn pills. I put them in my suitcase just before I closed it. Damn it, straight to hell." She stopped suddenly. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault. You know I'm not mad at you, right?" He patted her hand. "I know. Yell at me if it helps. We'll be home in about 40 minutes. Just hang on." She tried to smile. "Sing for me, document. You know it calms me down." So the man she called Doc sang for her in a soft baritone voice. He sang love ballads, murder ballads, songs of cowboys, miners, fallen women, lovers and criminals until he turned into her driveway. His real name was Will Jones, not Doc Holliday. Her real name was Sherry Wilson, not Annie Oakley. She was married, but not to the man she called Doc. They were members of the Raft River Rangers, the Western Reenactors Club. They were from Rolla, a small town in the hills of Missouri. There were similar clubs in every state and in many foreign countries. People united for various reasons. Some because of nostalgia for simpler times, others because of the spirit of adventure that those times personified, others because of the costumes of that time and the communication of like-minded people. Some joined in the shooting, especially with black powder weapons. This is most suitable for combining all of this. Sherry became a member of the club at the age of 12 when her father joined them. He always had a weakness for antique weapons, but after getting married, he obliged his wife to lock the weapon in a gun safe. She was from St. Louis, a nurse who had seen all too often what gunshot wounds could do to a human body. Unfortunately, when Sherry turned 10, her mother began to feel tired. She ignored it for a while, but eventually went to her doctor. It was cancer. She lasted another year. Her father owned an insurance company with a network of offices throughout the state. Money was not his goal, but he threw himself into expanding his business. Sherry was given a babysitter and time to be alone. 6 months later, her father realized his mistake and began to rebuild the relationship. In fact, he never ignored her. He loved her dearly, but grief clouded his mind. Joining Rangers provided him with the rapprochement experience he sought. One of his clients recalled his love of shooting. He was a local judge and a board member. He invited them to the farm. The farm was the headquarters of the Rangers, a real 140-acre farm, bequeathed by the founder with the understanding that in the event of the club's dissolution, the land would go to charity. With a roster of over 100 participants, the chances of this happening were really slim. Sherry will never forget her first visit. The farm was kept in good condition, with well-tended pastures, fields, and forests. A caretaker lived in the farmhouse all the time, who made sure that everything was kept in order. He lived for free. He had a truck and a small salary. The barn was the center of attention. Carefully remodeled over the years, it was now an exact replica of the Western Salon, which also served as a meeting room. The bar was closed during meetings and in the presence of minors. Alcohol was served on Saturday evenings and at adult events. The members of the club took turns taking care of the bar. Sherry and her father visited the farm on Saturday afternoon. They were given a tour of the barn and treated to frosty mugs of root beer. IBC, of course. After all, it was Missouri. Petite all her life. At the age of 12, she was only 140 centimeters, and sitting on a bar stool in a real Western saloon with a mug in her hand made a strong impression. When they went out to the shooting range, everything, absolutely everything changed. One of the main activities of these clubs was shooting competitions. The best shooters will compete in the districts, move on to qualifying, state, regional, and finally national competitions. It was a purely amateur competition. No money changed hands, with the possible exception of a gentleman's bet. Only trophies and the right to brag. They visited the farm at a time when training sessions for district meetings were being held. Even with the obligatory earplugs, Sherry was impressed by how loud it was. The sight of black powder flames shooting out of the barrels and smoke hanging in the air fascinated her. She stayed close to her father and the judge when they stopped from time to chat with the shooters. From time to time, One of the shooters suggested that her father shoot one of the weapons. He was always willing to agree. They were discussing the merits of a particular rifle, a reproduction Hawken .50 caliber, when Sherry discreetly stepped aside. After walking 2 stations, she saw him lying on a stand. The owner was sitting at a table, facing the other way, disassembling and cleaning other weapons. He noticed her, but because of her small stature, he mistook her for a much younger child and put her out of his mind. She picked it up and, after looking closely, realized what needed to be done. It was too heavy for her to hold it confidently with her small hands, so she put the butt on the stand for better support and carefully aligned the barrel. The shooting stopped. Otherwise, the owner would never have heard the triple click of the cocked trigger. He turned around and was horrified to see a girl of about 8 holding his Colt Walker. Her face was only inches away from him as she tried to aim. 3 things happened almost instantly. He screamed, "No!" She pulled the trigger. Walker's .44 caliber pistol, weighing 3 kilograms, bounced back. Her little hands weren't strong enough to hold him. He flew back, hitting her between the eyes. She fell down. Stunned, she recalled the next few minutes bit by bit. A lot of shouting, mostly at her, a man talking to her, radiating light into her eyes. And everywhere she looked, the adults looked with angry eyes. They put her in a golf cart and drove her back to the barn. As soon as she applied an ice pack to her rapidly swelling bruise, the lectures began. The judge came out first. "Young lady, you've just committed the most serious violation of the rules possible on a shooting range. You fired a weapon without permission into an area that had not been cleared. Thank God, the goal setting was already over. It's a weapon, my child. People could have died because of your carelessness. Besides, you've suffered because of your carelessness. We were just lucky that one of our shooters today was an ambulance doctor." When the judge ran up, the owner of the Colt started. "Besides all this, touching another person's weapon without permission is a serious violation of etiquette. This is an act of complete disrespect, which we do not take lightly." Sherry cried bitterly and begged for forgiveness. Her pleas were so sincere and pitiful that she did not notice how smiles began to appear on their faces. The judge looked around the room. "How about this, boys? Don't you want to call a jury?" 6 people, 4 men and 2 women, quickly sat down. The judge acted both as a prosecutor and as a judge in the case. Strangely enough, the man who owned the Colt agreed to protect her. It was short and sweet. "Do you admit to your actions?" The judge said sternly. She did it through sobs. "Your witness, the defense attorney, the man who turned out to be their gunsmith and was named Sam Colt, started. The judge, the jury members, mistakes were made today. I should never have left a loaded weapon unattended. Judge, she was your guest, and you should have watched her more closely." This caused the judge to frown. "And you, young lady, should have shown more respect." I think that roughly sums it up. He looked directly at the jury. "Anyway, I believe that she really regrets and will not repeat her mistakes." He paused spectacularly. Then he pulled the target out from under his vest. "But most of all, we would be idiots if we let go of a girl who has never fired any weapon before, without any training, and can still do it." He handed the target to the jury. It was the one she shot at. There was a hole in the exact center of the bullseye. Even the judge was grinning. "What do you say, jurors?" One of the women stood up after conferring with her companions. "Your Honor, we find this girl guilty." She looked directly at Sherry, who lowered her head in tears. "We ask that she and her father be invited to become members of the club, provided that she takes a course on gun safety as soon as possible and, as punishment for her crime, is sentenced to 2 months of cleaning work at the shooting range and in the saloon." "If that's what you want, Your Honor." The judge stood up. "Well said. You adhere to the Western tradition that punishment should correspond to the crime. Stand up, young lady." She stood up. "The jury has spoken, and I agree with one addition. Each participant here has a name taken from a real person from the Old West. In real life, I'm a judge, so here I'm speaking on behalf of Roy Bean. Sometimes it is chosen by a member of the board, sometimes by the Board of Governors. We have 4 board members here. With the approval of everyone here, I suggest we immediately name you Annie Oakley, after a petite woman who was probably one of the best shooters of any gender. What do you say, officers and members of the club?" The walls of the saloon echoed with approval. And that's how the modern Annie Oakley appeared. For the next 3 weeks, Annie had to stay away from the shooting range while her father practiced. She took the time to get to know the members of the club and their children. Every week, before going home, she swept the salon and took out the trash. She was maddened by the sound of gunfire from a gun with black powder, but she never complained. By the 4th week, she had a gun safety certificate and a set of Remington .31 caliber 5-shot revolvers with 9-centimeter barrels. Even with a third of the weight of the walkers, they were still almost too heavy for her. But under the guidance of Sam Colt, she became an artist. They experimented with the charges and found that they were still effective at only 2/3 of the normal charge of gunpowder. The reduced recoil helped tremendously. At the age of 13, she began participating in shooting competitions. She took 3rd place at the regional competitions. 6 months later, she took 1st place and made it to the state. At the age of 15, she won state and regional competitions and placed 3rd in national competitions. At 17, she won it all, the young national champion in pistol and rifle shooting in the black powder division. She gave up competitive shooting to concentrate on college, from which she graduated with a degree in finance. She started as an agent in one of her father's offices and worked her way up to manager. After being released from school, she resumed competitive shooting. She married a man her father didn't trust and disapproved of. This almost brings us back to where we started. Well, Jones appeared about 3 years before the beginning of our story. He had a distant relative here who wanted to sell his dental practice at a good price. He knew the area and made a good deal, so he bought it when he came from Georgia with his wife 6 months after the wedding. 3 months later, in the midst of one of the harshest winters in recent years, she decided that she liked the sunny South more than marriage. Fortunately, he had a prenuptial agreement, and since he had been married for less than a year, it was terminated. He met Sherry's father when his dentist retired and came to him. They talked about guns, and Will invited him to his home to show him his prized possession, the Confederate version of the Colt .36 caliber Navy Colt, manufactured by Star Arms. His great-great-grandfather wore it in the war. Her father invited her to go out to meet with the Rangers. He instantly became close to the group. As it turned out, he was deathly in love with pistols. Being two-armed, he could shoot accurately with 2 pistols at once. Almost overnight, the trophy case began to expand. Because he is tall, thin, and a dentist from Georgia, only one name would be suitable for him: Doc Holliday. When he met Annie, she immediately attracted him. When he saw her rings, he felt a strange sense of loss. But being a gentleman from the South, he treated her with respect. She felt the same way, but even if her marriage was a little shaky at times, she still kept her vows. Being the 2 best shooters in the group, they were constantly together, and after the initial awkwardness, they formed a close friendship. When the Rangers went to the competition, they traveled in style. The wealthier participants were extremely proud of their trophies, to the point of sponsoring some of the best shooters financially. One of the participants was a trucker, and whenever possible, he delivered a custom-made stagecoach and 3 buggies to the state level and above. Other band members transported horses in 2-seater trucks similar to the one owned by Document. They booked places in equestrian campgrounds and set up tents, while those who liked comfort more stayed in hotels. On the day of the shooting, they were supposed to meet and ride in style, with escorts leading the stagecoach and carriages in a procession designed to intimidate. It almost always worked. At the state level and above, it was a 2-day event. Most of the Rangers liked it. It gave them the opportunity to communicate informally with other groups. Will played the mandolin, and there were several guitarists and violinists, so there were often jam sessions or impromptu dances. Annie stayed close to Doc during these meetings for safety reasons. The tent they shared with their father was almost always next to his tent. The specific meeting they were returning from was canceled due to rain. It was supposed to just rain on Friday morning, but by noon a real downpour began. It did not subside all night, and by Saturday morning it was still strong. Black powder does not tolerate rain well. The host club canceled it and postponed it for 2 weeks. Everyone packed up and left. It was a blessing for Annie. In her freshman year of college, she developed an acute attack of premenstrual syndrome. She tried to fight it, but it got so bad that she almost got expelled. Finally, the doctor found a suitable medicine to balance her hormonal background and mental state. Before taking the medication, the seizures were excruciating, and in her own words, she turned into a screaming fool who hated everyone, including herself. She took the pills religiously and couldn't figure out why they were missing from her suitcase. According to her, she also would not be able to compete because she would be shaking so much that she would not be able to hit anything, and that was good because a loaded weapon in her hands right now was not a good idea. Her father was on the national board of directors, and since no one could compete, they decided to hold an impromptu planning meeting. On the one hand, he was sad because he had finally met someone and wanted to go back to her house, and glad because he had had the experience of talking to Annie without pills, and the 5-hour trip with her scared him. He took the easy way out and persuaded Doc to take her home. And now we're back to where we started. 38 minutes later, Doc backed in her driveway so they could unload her gear. Her house was old and partially built into the hillside. It was in excellent condition, and she kept it clean, which was important given her husband's habits. The garage was also a basement. She got out of the car and slung the gun belt over her shoulder. "Give me a minute, document. The garage door opener is on the visor of my car at Dad's house. I'll go in the side door and open it from the inside. Then I'll see where I left my pills." She was shaking almost uncontrollably. He was afraid that she might faint. "I'll take a walk with you. Maybe you dropped your pills on the garage floor." She was fiddling with her keys. He took them, used the one she pointed to, and let her inside. "What the hell is that? Why is this girl's car in my garage?" A Volkswagen convertible, painted, was parked in its place. Only one person in the city drives such a car. Lisa Gold, one of her agents. Before he could react, she was already out the door and heading for the master bedroom. He caught her at the open bedroom door. Fortunately, she froze for a minute. He approached her just as she pulled out one of her pistols and pointed it at the bed. He didn't have time to pull the gun out of her hand, so he tried to put it down. His hand touched the trigger just as she pulled the trigger, and his thumb was between the firing pin and the capsule. The firing pin cut through his skin, but did not let him shoot. Using his momentum and size, he lifted her up and put his hand over her mouth. She kicked his shins with her boots and tried to bite his hand, but he dragged her back to the basement. The couple on the bed didn't even notice them. Lisa was wearing Annie's favorite Stetson hat and her ostrich leather boots and nothing else. She was on all fours. Jimmy stood behind her and used her while she screamed, "Ride me, cowboy." "Yeah. Ah." He let her fight for a while. "Annie, calm down. I'm not going to lose you by letting you kill them. It's not worth it." His words were barely audible, but she finally stopped. He took his hand away from her mouth and sat her down on the workbench where she kept her shooting supplies. He took her pistols and took out the cartridges. She sat and shivered. He touched her gently. "Come on, I'll take you home with me." She blinked several times and began to shake her head negatively. "Not yet. I'm going to let these two jerks know that I know." He could see the rage boiling in her. She looked wildly around, saw her pistols with missing cartridges, stopped and smiled. Reaching for the locker behind the desk, she pulled out an additional cylinder and began to install it. "Annie, I'm not going to let you shoot them." She poured and packed the powder into cartridges, adding a little rock salt, which was lying in her corner, to clear the sidewalks of snow. "I'm not going to shoot them. I'm not going to put bullets in, but I'm going to scare the shit out of them." She loaded 4 cartridges and fitted the caps. "Come on, be quiet." They crept quietly up the stairs. The lovers finished making love, and they could be heard talking. "Honey, aren't you afraid that we might be caught?" "It won't matter much to me because I'm single." "If you despise that little fool, why are you staying with her?" "I never say no, and I always come when you call, and in different ways." Lisa giggled at her own joke. He laughed with her. "We've been making love for almost a year, and she still doesn't know anything about it. Thanks to this stupid gun club and her belief that she's the reincarnation of fucking Annie Oakley, we have a lot of time. Anyone who could report us is with her now." He stopped to grin with satisfaction. "I bet she won't win this time. She pissed me off before she left with her to-do list, so I stole her fucking pills from her bag. Right now, she's probably shaking like a leaf and ripping off some poor guy's new ass with one hand and ripping off his head with the other. And no matter how much I love this and this and this," they heard soft sighs. "She has something that you don't have. A pocket full of money." "Oh, she doesn't have that yet, but her old man won't last forever. And when he leaves, she'll inherit. We don't have a prenup, so I automatically get half. Half is worth millions. I'll leave her ass, split 50 to 50, and you and I will go somewhere warm. Does that sound like a good plan? Annie heard everything she could stand. She burst through the door shouting assholes, and she fired. Black powder makes a loud sound, especially in a confined space. Combine this with smoke, flames, the sound of unburned gunpowder and rock salt hitting a wall, and anyone would be scared. Lisa and Jimmy cried and begged, while Annie used all 7 dirty words that George Carlin talked about in the most interesting ways. Finally, she stopped and cocked the trigger. Shut the fuck up. Get both your pathetic asses off the bed and get down to the garage. Right now, damn it. And don't try to run away. Annie escorted them to the basement. She refused to let them get dressed. She seemed distant. Open the garage door. They started complaining. It was cold. It was raining. It was still light. It was a mistake. They were both sorry. She walked up to Jimmy and put the muzzle to his balls. If you don't open this door by the time I count to 3, I'm going to pull the trigger. There is no bullet in it. All it contains is a double portion of powder and about an ounce of rock salt. It probably won't kill you unless you bleed to death. But if you have any balls left at all, they'll be useless. 1. DV. The garage door swung open. She smiled. Now I'm going to give you a chance. I'll count to 5. When I count to 5, I'm going to shoot you in the ass. If you run fast enough, you'll just get covered in dust in this rain. If you delay or slip, the rock salt will dissolve in your ass within a week. Oh, and by the way, I'm filing for divorce. Now let's just see how well I hit the target without those stupid pills. He started apologizing that it was a mistake, and he still loved her. She smiled. 1. Pure terror gave him speed. He flew down the sidewalk while she was counting. 2, 3, 4. Bang! His scream was unreal. She hit him right in the ass. Doc thought she might have underestimated the power of the double charge of gunpowder. She looked back and smiled at Lisa. Why don't you run away? 1, 2. End.